Hello, everybody. Where's my clock? What? Where's my clock? Well, anyway, hello. How's it going? How's everybody doing? We've got our scuff already in. Oh, wait, one moment. There we go. And we've got our scuff already. I'm doing pretty good. Get that good night's sleep. I went to bed late again. And then this morning I went, okay, I'm gonna stay in bed a little longer. I'm gonna stay in bed a little longer, and then I did so. There's the clock. Boop. You have a box. You have a special box. I made a special layout. Rookie mistake. Is it loud? Is the music loud? I can turn it down. There. But yeah, I stayed in bed, but I didn't actually get any good extra sleep. Okay, how is it now? I was like, I'll go back to sleep, and when my alarm goes off at 7, I'll get up. And then at some point I was just kind of awake, and I went, well, it's probably 7, right? Or close. And then it was 5:30. So I was like, oh, I guess I'm getting up now. I had also just woken up before my alarm at the normal time. Anyway, so that was fun. I was like, but I need more sleep. I thought I needed more sleep, but apparently my body had other ideas. But anyway, how are you guys? Hello. I see. Hello, Chief Shark, Sir, Ma'am. That's quite a collection of titles. Hello to everybody. Yeah, I should just go to bed on time, but you know. I have my tea here. I'm kind of nervous about today's stream. It's a little unusual. We're shaking it up a little bit. It's still the reading stream, right? So it's not that unusual, but I'm still nervous about it because it's a little different. But anyway, I made the new layout. I thought we do these enough, once a month for reading. The regular layout isn't really well suited to it. So I just shifted some things around, and we have a slightly scuffed new layout just for this. And for something else that we'll see on Sunday. Yeah, body really does want what it wants, yeah. I'm gonna turn this into a sleep stream. If we could have snore ASMR. I don't think I snore. I guess I don't know for sure. Say all of my names to start the stream. I guess you could. It might draw out the beginning of the stream a bit. I have to live with the curse of bad sleeping. You'll tell me if I snore. I see. No, I think that's okay. I don't think we need to get into that. I think it'll be okay if we don't. Let's see. So we have here the Raven to begin. Can I do this thing? Oh, I can. I can smooth scroll it. Look at that. Amazing. The snore lore. There's no snore lore. There's none. But anyway, we have a few poems and a few stories prepared for today. And I hope you will like them. I did my best to go through them beforehand and check for content. These stories are old. There were some I excluded for content. certain contents. I think the ones that are in here are okay. I hope they are. I can hope that I didn't miss anything. But if I did, we'll deal with it when we get there. For say-so reasons, less say-so reasons and more general. It's the 21st century and not the 19th century. Only reciting Elden Ring lore in sleep. I would do that. I would do that. The ancient text may be spicy. Yeah, we'll find out in real time. Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully we won't. There were at least a couple that I had wanted to read. I think that I had to leave out, but it's okay. It's okay. But anyway, we have here the Raven. Are we ready to get started? We're starting with the classic, the one, the classic, the Raven. Oh yeah, and once we're finished with all of the Poe stories and poems I have lined up, we have an extra special story at the end. So, hello. There was no Reddit back then to contain all the Sonic OCs. That's right. I had to leave out all of the stories about Edgar Allan Poe's Sonic OCs. So, I won't plague you with those. Alright. I think I'm ready to get going. I've never read poetry before. I mean, like, I've read poetry, but not like... I've never read poetry out loud before. So, extra spicy story at the end? No! No spicy. No spice. Okay. You probably won't enjoy it. Okay. At least you're honest. Alright, let's just get going. The Raven. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door, "only this, and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore. For the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore, nameless here for evermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, this it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door, darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word Lenore. This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word Lenore. Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when, with many a flirt and flutter, In there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with the mien of lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven. Ghastly, grim, and ancient raven wandering from the nightly shore, tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore, for we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above this chamber door, with such name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before, on the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of nevermore. But the raven still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamp lighting gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamp light gloating o'er, she shall press, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretched, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempters sent or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there some balm, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore. Tell this soul is sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden whom the angels named Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting, get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him dreaming throws his shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. And now is the raven. Hello, Muffin Man. Welcome in. Gotta give my voice a second. Can't say follow the story, need choose help explaining. He's in grief over the death of Lenore, and the Raven comes to taunt him about it, more or less. The other ones are more straightforward, I think. I think the other poems I threw in are shorter, at least. The stories are pretty straightforward, though. Poetry is kind of, you know, it's poetry. I like poetry, though. Anyway, let me sip some more tea and then we'll get going. On the next one, we have The Telltale Heart, another classic. Another classic Poe story. Whoops. Sounds like Chief in chat during the second Bloodborne stream. The New Game Plus incident. The New Game Plus incident? I don't recall. I do not recall. I just noticed a part of my overlay I should have changed. But you know what? We're here now. Anyway, we have the Telltale. Oh, wait. Let me check one thing really quick before we. Oh, right. Oh, yeah, that. Okay, I had to check that the playlist was gonna loop. The playlist maybe should have been a little bit longer, but it's okay. Hopefully it won't be a problem for you guys. Alright. It was actually harder to find the kind of music I wanted for this than I thought it would be. I think I got a decent collection. Alright, we have The Telltale Heart. Off we go. True! Nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken, and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man, he had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye, yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so, by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the week before I killed him. And every night about midnight I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed so that no light shone out, and I thrust my head in. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously, cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye, and this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber, and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been very profound old man, indeed, to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was opening the door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly, as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch, with the thick darkness, for the shutters were close fastened, though through fear of robbers. And so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily. I had my head in, and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in the bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief, oh no! It was the low stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise, when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor, or it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he has been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he found all in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until, at length, a single dim ray, like the thread of the spider, shot from the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones, but I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct precisely upon the damned spot. And now have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now, I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet, I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous, so I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder, louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now, a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all, ha! When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart. For what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room, and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definitiveness, until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the boards, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, they heard. They suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die, and now, again, hark, louder, 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 louder. Villains, I shrieked, dissemble no more, I admit the deed. Tear up the planks, here, here. It is the beating of his hideous heart. And that was the telltale heart. Oh, not on the TV again. While I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly the stream is starting as if Scott was happening. But yeah, how's everybody doing? I am sipping my tea. Hydration is occurring. Cozy and peaceful. I'm glad, even if it's a horror. How'd we like that one? Probably a little bit easier to follow than the where we started. Deserves to be on the TV and main monitor. I don't want to be on a TV. I don't need to be on anybody's TV. I'm good out here. I put me on a small screen. Maybe like not a phone, because it can be hard to see everything on a phone. Chat's kind of small. But computer screen is totally fine. Maybe an iPad if you have one. That would also be okay. Heard old man and dead, so that's good. Okay. All-time classic, indeed. All right, let's get going to the next one. We have, I believe, a much shorter poem. The Teletron at the stadium? No. Monitor is a TV? Ah, dang it. What was it about? I'm not explaining what it was about. I just read it. We already did it. Alright. It is also on the screen if you want to like read along as well. If that would help, if you want to get it. I don't know what to tell you. Instead of kiss cam, it's a short cam. Just interrupt the action every now and then. Anyway, we have another poem. The Haunted Palace. In the greenest of our valleys, by good angels tenanted, once a fair and stately palace, snow-white palace, reared its head. In the monarch thought's dominion, it stood there. Never seraph spread his pinion over fabric half so fair. Banners yellow, glorious golden, on its roof did float and flow. All this was in the olden time long ago. And every gentle air that dallied in that sweet day along the rampart, plumed and pallid, a winged odor went away. All wanderers in that happy valley through two luminous windows saw spirits moving musically to a lute's well-tuned law. Round about a throne were sitting Porphyrogene in his glory well befitting, the sovereign of the realm was seen. And all with pearl and ruby glowing was the fair palace door, through which came flowing, and sparkling evermore a troop of echoes whose sweet duty was but to sing in voices of surpassing beauty the wit and wisdom of their king. But evil things in robes of sorrow assailed the monarch's high estate. Ah, let us mourn, for never morrow shall dawn upon him desolate. And round about his home the glory that blushed and bloomed is but a dim remembered story of the old time entombed. And travelers now within that valley through the red-litten windows see vast forms that move fantastically to a discordant melody, while like a rapid ghastly river through the pale door a hideous throng rush out forever and laugh but smile no more. Yeah, that line is so good. I like this one. It's a little simpler, but it's very good. It's the problems of creaky floorboards. Yeah, make sure your floorboards are well maintained. Dream within a dream. I don't remember if I looked at that one. There were some that I checked and then did not include. Doesn't help. Well, maybe not for that. It maybe didn't help for that one, but maybe for one of the stories it'll help. That one was about a haunted palace. All right. And then we have another classic. This one, I had to look up how to pronounce some things beforehand. I think I found most of the words that I did not know how to say. We'll see if I remember how to say them well. Troop of Echoes, Wisdom of their King section, favorite snippets of poetry. Maybe I don't know. Okay, let me make a note. Maybe we could throw it in another time. Because this is I have a pretty set list of the stuff I'm reading today, but we could see about another one some other time, maybe. A dream within a dream. I will at least read it on my own time because I don't think I've read that one before. Yeah, I feel like a lot of the like really great authors back in the day had like really, really awful lives. They had it rough for whatever reason or other. And Poe was certainly no exception. But alright. Here we have let me give one more sip. Okay. Here we have The Cask of Amontillado. This one's a little longer. I think I might have to stop like in the middle. We'll see. I've been doing pretty good on these though, so far. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as I best could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato. Although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared, he prided himself on his connoisseurship of wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity to practice imposture upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and gemmery, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack, but in the matter of old wines he was sincere. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitting party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How," said he, "Amontillado, a pipe? Impossible! And in the middle of the carnival?" "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain. Amontillado! I have my doubts. Amontillado! And I must satisfy them. Amontillado!" As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchesi. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me, Lucchesi cannot tell Amontillado from sherry, and yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own. Come, let us go. Whither? To your vaults. My friend, no, I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. Lucchesi, I have no engagement, come. My friend, no, it is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp, they are encrusted with nitre. Let us go nevertheless. The cold is merely nothing. Amontillado you have been imposed upon. And as for Lucchesi, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado. Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm. Putting on a mask of black silk and drawing a roquelaire closely about my person, I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I had told them that I should not return until the morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. I took from their sconces 2 flambeaux, and giving one to Fortunato, I bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led into the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent, and stood together on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. "The pipe," said he. "It is farther on," said I, "but observe the white webwork which gleams from these cavern walls." He turned towards me, and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. "Nitre?" he asked at length. "Nitre," I replied. "How long have you had that cough?" My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. "It is nothing," he said at last. "Come," I said with decision. "We will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy as I was. You are a man to be missed. For me, it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Lucchesi." "Enough," he said. "The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." "Enough. Oh, sorry." "True, true," I replied, "and indeed I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but you should use all proper caution. A draught of this Medoc will defend us from the damps." Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mould. "Drink," I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly, while his bells jingled. "I drink," he said, "to the buried that repose around us." "And I to your long life." He again took my arm, and we proceeded. "These vaults," he said, "are extensive." "The Montresors," I replied, "were a great and numerous family." "I forget your arms." "A huge human foot d'or in a field azure. The foot crushes a serpent rampant whose fangs are embedded in the heel, and the motto, Nemo me impune lacessit." "Good," he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes, and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the Medoc. We had passed through the walls of piled bones, with casks and puncheons intermingling, into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by an arm above the elbow. "The nitre," I said, "see, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we will go back ere it is too late. Your cough." "It is nothing," he said. "Let us go on. But first another draught of the Medoc." I broke and reached him a flagon of de Grave. He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upwards with a gesticulation I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. "You do not comprehend," he said. "Not I. Then you are not of the Brotherhood." "How? You are not of the Masons." "Yes, yes," I said. "Yes, yes." "You? Impossible! A Mason." "A Mason," I replied. "A sign," he said. "It is this," I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my roquelaire. "You jest," he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado." "Be it so," I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descended again, arriving at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeaux rather to glow than flame. At the most remote end of the crypt there appeared another less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains piled to the vault overhead in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the 4th, the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no especial use within itself, but formed merely the interval between 2 of the colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of their circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depths of the recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. "Proceed," I said. "Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucchesi—" "He is an ignoramus," interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing the links about his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. "Pass your hand," I said, "over the wall. You cannot help feeling the nitre." "Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return." "No? Then I will positively leave you. But I must first render you all the little attentions in my power." "The Amontillado!" ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. "True," I replied, "the Amontillado." As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones of which I have before spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of my masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low moaning cry from the depths of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the 2nd tier, and the 3rd, and the 4th, and then I heard the furious vibrations of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with the more satisfaction, I ceased my labors, and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel, and finished without interruption the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th tier. The wall was now nearly upon a level with my breast. I again paused, and holding the flambeau over the masonwork, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated, I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess, but the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamorer grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its destined position, but now there came from out the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, "Ha ha ha, he, a very good joke indeed, an excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the palazzo, ha, over our wine." "The Amontillado," I said. "Ah, yes, the Amontillado, but is it not getting late? Will they not be awaiting us at the palazzo? The Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone." "Yes," I said, "let us be gone." "For the love of God, Montresor!" "Yes," I said, "for the love of God." But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, "Fortunato." No answer. I called again, "Fortunato!" No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For the half of a century, no mortal has disturbed them. In pace requiescat. And that was the Cask of Amontillado. Yeah, this guy should have, I mean, he was drunk, right? Hello! How we doing? I'm drinking more of my tea now. And what did he do wrong, you know? What did he do to be killed like this, you know? I imagine it's just like he made a joke at a party or something. Like I imagine it wasn't actually anything serious. About how funny pranking your friends is. It's just a prank, bro. That's like, hey, we'd better get out of here. We better get going. Yeah. Isn't this a great prank, bro? Okay, see ya. We're about halfway through my document here, according to the scroll bar. We're making good time. What do we got next? The Conqueror Worm. A fun one. Pretty overbearing, seems to only act in self-interest. Well, that is true. But I don't know, I wonder. This guy's like really set on this plan. I wonder how justified he is or is not. It's hard to say. Probably not very justified. Okay. I have set down my tea. It is time for the Conqueror Worm. Lo, 'tis a gala night. Within the lonesome latter years, a mystic throng, bewinged, bedight, in veils and drowned in tears, sit in a theater to see a play of hopes and fears, while the orchestra breathes fitfully the music of the spheres. Mimes in the form of God on high mutter and mumble low, and hither and thither fly. Mere puppets they who come and go at bidding of vast shadowy things that shift the scenery to and fro, flapping from out their condor wings invisible woe. The motley drama, oh, be sure it shall not be forgot, with its phantom chased for evermore by a crowd that sees it not, through a circle that ever returneth in to the same spot, and much of madness and more of sin and horror the soul of the plot. But see, amid the mimic rout, a crawling shape intrude, a blood-red thing that rises from out the scenic solitude. It writhes with mortal pangs. The mimes become its food, and the angels sob at vermin fangs, in human gore imbued. Out, out are the lights, out all, and over each dying form the curtain, a funeral pall, comes down with the rush of a storm, and the seraphs, all haggard and wan, uprising, unveiling, affirm that the play is the tragedy man, it is its hero, the conqueror worm. That's a fun one. I like that one a lot. And then we have the black cat. Let me, oh, never mind, I remembered. I was gonna check what we have left, but I remembered. Conqueror Worm is a short one. There's a story that he did after Conqueror Worm that ties into it. But I went for the poem. I think it's very like to the point. At the end of the day, we're worm food. Yup, that's the gist of it. Thanks for the comfy bedtime story, Night Night. You're so welcome. I hope that you will have very, very lovely dreams from listening to this. Gonna nap, voice too soothing. Well, I guess that works out. I hope the horrors that I'm reading about don't give you bad dreams or anything. Up next we have the black cat. I think this one is a little bit like the Telltale Heart. Kind of. Horror's good. Okay, great. Alright, let me take one more drink. Okay. The Black Cat. For the most wild yet most homely narrative which I am about to pen, I neither expect nor solicit belief. Mad indeed would I be to expect it, in a case where my very senses reject their own evidence, yet mad I am not, and very surely do I not dream. But tomorrow I die, and today I would unburthen my soul. My immediate purpose is to place before the world, plainly, succinctly, and without comment, a series of mere household events. In their consequences, these events have terrified, have tortured, have destroyed me. Yet I will not attempt to expound them. To me, they have presented little but horror. To many, they will seem less terrible than Baroque's. Hereafter, perhaps, some intellect may be found which will reduce my phantasm to the commonplace. Some intellect more calm, more logical, and far less excitable than my own, which will perceive, in the circumstances I detail with awe, nothing more than an ordinary succession of very natural causes and effects. From my infancy, I was noted for the docility and humanity of my disposition. My tenderness of heart was even so conspicuous as to make me the jest of my companions. I was especially fond of animals, and was indulged by my parents with a great variety of pets. With these I spent most of my time, and never was so happy as when feeding and caressing them. This peculiarity of character grew within my growth, and in my manhood I derived from it one of my principal sources of pleasure. To those who have cherished an affection for a faithful and sagacious dog, I need hardly be at the trouble of explaining the nature or the intensity of the gratification thus derivable. There is something in the unselfish and self-sacrificing love of a brute which goes directly to the heart of him who has had frequent occasion to test the paltry friendship and gossamer fidelity of mere man. I married early and was happy to find in my wife a disposition not uncongenial with my own. Observing my partiality for domestic pets, she lost no opportunity of procuring those of the most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, rabbits, a small monkey, and a cat. This latter was a remarkably large and beautiful animal, entirely black and sagacious to an astonishing degree. In speaking of her intelligence, my wife, who at heart was not a little tinctured with superstition, made frequent allusion to the ancient popular notion which regarded all black cats as witches in disguise. Not that she was ever serious upon this point, and I mention the matter at all for no better reason than that it happens just now to be remembered. Pluto, this was the cat's name, was my favorite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he attended me wherever I went about the house. It was even with difficulty that I could prevent him from following me through the streets. Our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general temperament and character, through the instrumentality of the fiend Temperance, had, I blush to confess it, experienced a radical alteration for the worse. I grew day by day more moody, more irritable, more regardless of the feelings of others. I suffered myself to use intemperate language to my wife. At length I even offered her personal violence. My pets, of course, were made to feel the change in my disposition. I not only neglected, but ill-used them. For Pluto, however, I still retained sufficient regard to restrain me from maltreating him, as I made no scruple of maltreating the rabbits, the monkey, or even the dog, when, by accident or through affection, they came in my way. But my disease grew upon me, for what disease is like alcohol? And at length even Pluto, who was now becoming old and consequently somewhat peevish, even Pluto began to experience the effects of my ill temper. One night, returning home, much intoxicated from one of my haunts about town, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized him, when, in his fright at my violence, he inflicted a slight wound upon my hand with his teeth. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I knew myself no longer. My original soul seemed at once to take its flight from my body, and a more than fiendish malevolence, gin-nurtured, thrilled every fibre of my frame. I took from my waistcoat pocket a penknife, opened it, grasped the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of its eyes from the socket. I blush, I burn, I shudder, while I pen the damnable atrocity. When reason returned in the morning, when I had slept off the fumes of the night's debauch, I experienced a sentiment half of horror, half of remorse for the crime of which I had been guilty, but it was at best a feeble and equivocal feeling, and the soul remained untouched. I again plunged into excess, and soon drowned in wine all memory of the deed. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented, it is true, a frightful appearance, but he no longer appeared to suffer any pain. He went about the house as usual, but, as might be expected, fled in extreme terror at my approach. I had so much of my old heart left as to be at first grieved by this evident dislike on the part of a creature which had once so loved me. But this feeling soon gave place to irritation, and then came, as if to my final and irrevocable overthrow, the spirit of perverseness. Of this spirit philosophy takes no account. Phrenology finds no place for it among its organs. Yet I am not more sure that my soul lives than I am that perverseness is one of the primitive impulses of the human heart, one of the indivisible primary faculties or sentiments which give direction to the character of man. Who has not 100 times found himself committing a vile or silly action for no other reason than because he knows he should not? Have we not a perpetual inclination, in the teeth of our best judgment, to violate that which is law, merely because we understand it to be such? The spirit of perverseness, I say, came to my final overthrow. It was this unfathomable longing of the soul to vex itself, that ought to offer violence to its own nature, to do wrong for wrong's sake only, that urged me to continue and finally to consummate the injury I had inflicted upon the unoffending brute. One morning, in cold blood, I slipped a noose about its neck and hung it from the limb of a tree, hung it with the tears streaming from my eyes and with the bitterest remorse at my heart, hung it because I knew that it had loved me, and because I felt it had given me no reason of offense, hung it because I knew that in so doing I was committing a sin, a deadly sin that would so jeopardize my immortal soul as to place it, if such a thing were possible, even beyond the reach of the infinite mercy of the most merciful and most terrible God. On the night of the day on which this cruel deed was done, I was aroused from sleep by the cry of fire. The curtains of my bed were in flames. The whole house was blazing. It was with great difficulty that my wife, a servant, and myself made our escape from the conflagration. The destruction was complete. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up, and I resigned myself thenceforward to despair. I am above the weakness of seeking to establish a sequence of cause and effect between the disaster and the atrocity, but I am detailing a chain of facts, a wish not to leave even a possible link imperfect. On the day succeeding the fire, I visited the ruins. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. This exception was found in a compartment wall, not very thick, which stood about the middle of the house, and against which had rested the head of my bed. The plastering had here, in great measure, resisted the action of the fire, a fact which I attributed to its having been recently spread. About this wall a dense crowd were collected, and many persons seemed to be examining a particular portion of it with very minute and eager attention. The words strange, singular, and other similar expressions excited my curiosity. I approached and saw, as if graven in bas-relief upon the white surface, the figure of a gigantic cat. The impression was given with an accuracy truly marvelous. There had been a rope about the animal's neck. When I first beheld this apparition, for I could scarcely regard it as less, my wonder and my terror were extreme. But at length reflection came to my aid. The cat, I remembered, had been hung in a garden adjacent to the house. Upon the alarm of fire, this garden had been immediately filled by the crowd, by someone of whom the animal must have been cut from the tree and thrown through an open window into my chamber. This had probably been done with the view of arousing me from sleep. The falling of the other walls had compressed the victim of my cruelty into the substance of the freshly spread plaster, the lime of which, with the flames and the ammonia of the carcass, had then accomplished the portraiture as I saw it. Although I thus readily accounted to my reason, if not altogether to my conscience, for the startling fact just detailed, it did not the less fail to make a deep impression upon my fancy. For months I could not rid myself of the phantasm of the cat, and, during this period, there came back into my spirit a half-sentiment that seemed, but was not, remorse. I went so far as to regret the loss of the animal, and to look about me among the vile haunts which I now habitually frequented, for another pet of the same species and of somewhat similar appearance with which to supply its place. One night, as I sat half stupefied in a den of more than infamy, my attention was suddenly drawn to some black object reposing upon the head of one of the immense hogsheads of gin or of rum which constitute the chief furniture of the apartment. I had been looking steadily at the top of this hogshead for some minutes, and what now caused me surprise was the fact that I had not sooner perceived the object thereupon. I approached it and touched it with my hand. It was a black cat, a very large one, fully as large as Pluto, and closely resembling him in every respect but one. Pluto had not a white hair upon any portion of his body, but this cat had a large, although indefinite splotch of white, covering nearly the whole region of the breast. Upon my touching him, he immediately arose, purred loudly, rubbed against my hand, and appeared delighted with my notice. This, then, was the very creature of which I was in search. I had once offered to purchase it of the landlord, but this person made no claim to it, knew nothing of it, had never seen it before. I continued my caresses, and when I prepared to go home, the animal evinced a disposition to accompany me. I permitted it to do so, occasionally stooping and patting it as I proceeded. When it reached the house, it domesticated itself at once, and became immediately a great favorite with my wife. For my own part, I soon found a dislike to it arising within me. This was just the reverse of what I had anticipated, but I know not how or why it was, its evident fondness for myself rather disgusted and annoyed. By slow degrees these feelings of disgust and annoyance rose into the bitterness of hatred. I avoided the creature, a certain sense of shame and the remembrance of my former deed of cruelty preventing me from physically abusing it. I did not for some weeks strike or otherwise violently ill-use it, but gradually, very gradually, I came to look upon it with unutterable loathing, and to flee silently from its odious presence as from the breath of a pestilence. What added no doubt to my hatred of the beast was the discovery, on the morning after I brought it home, that, like Pluto, it also had been deprived of one of its eyes. This circumstance, however, only endeared it to my wife, who, as I have already said, possessed in a high degree that humanity of feeling which had once been my distinguishing trait, and the source of many of my simplest and purest pleasures. With my aversion to this cat, however, its partiality for myself seemed to increase. It followed my footsteps with a pertinacity which it would be difficult to make the reader comprehend. Whenever I sat, it would crouch beneath my chair or spring upon my knees, covering me with its loathsome caresses. If I arose to walk, it would get between my feet and thus nearly throw me down, or, fastening its long and sharp claws into my dress, clamber in this manner to my breast. At such times, although I longed to destroy it with a blow, I was yet withheld from so doing, partly by a memory of my former crime, but chiefly, let me confess it at once, by absolute dread of the beast. The dread was not exactly a dread of physical evil, and yet I should be at a loss how otherwise to define it. I am almost ashamed to own, yes, even in this felon's cell, I am almost ashamed to own, that the terror and horror with which the animal inspired me had but heightened but one of the merest chimeras it would be possible to conceive. My wife had called my attention more than once to the character of the mark of white hair of which I have spoken, and which constituted the sole visible difference between the strange beast and the one I had destroyed. The reader will remember that this mark, although large, had been originally very indefinite, but by slow degrees nearly imperceptible, in which for a long time my reason struggled to reject as fanciful. It had, at length, assumed a rigorous distinctness of outline. It was now the representation of an object that I shudder to name, and for this, above all, I loathed and dreaded and would have rid myself of the monster had I dared. It was now, I say, the image of a ghastly thing, of the gallows. O mournful and terrible engine of horror and crime, of agony and of death! And now was I indeed wretched, but beyond the wretchedness of mere humanity, and a brute beast whose fellow I had contemptuously destroyed, a brute beast to work out for me, for a man fashioned in the image of the high God, so much of insufferable woe. Alas! Neither by day nor by night knew I the blessing of rest any more. During the former, the creature left me no moment alone, and in the latter I started hourly from the dreams of unutterable fear, to find the hot breath of the thing upon my face, and its vast weight, an incarnate nightmare that I had no power to shake off, incumbent eternally upon my heart. Beneath the pressure of torments such as these, the feeble remnant of the good within me succumbed. Evil thoughts became my sole intimates, the darkest and most evil of thoughts. The moodiness of my usual temper, increased to hatred of all things and of all mankind, while from the sudden, frequent, and ungovernable outbursts of a fury to which I now blindly abandoned myself, my uncomplaining wife, alas, was the most usual and the most patient of sufferers. One day she accompanied me upon some household errand into the cellar of the old building which our poverty compelled us to inhabit. The cat followed me down the steep stairs, and, nearly throwing me headlong, exasperated me to madness. Uplifting an axe, and forgetting in my wrath the childish dread which had hitherto stayed my hand, I aimed a blow at the animal, which, of course, would have proved instantly fatal had it descended as I wished, but this blow was arrested by the hand of my wife. Goaded by the interference into a rage more than demoniacal, I withdrew my arm from her grasp and buried the axe in her brain. She fell dead upon the spot without a groan. The hideous murder accomplished, I set myself forthwith, and with entire deliberation, to the task of concealing the body. I knew that I could not remove it from the house, either by day or by night, without the risk of being observed by the neighbors. Many projects entered my mind. At one period, I thought of cutting the corpse into minute fragments and destroying them by fire. At another, I resolved to dig a grave for it in the floor of the cellar. Again, I deliberated about casting it in the well in the yard. about packing it in a box as if merchandise, with the usual arrangements, and so getting a porter to take it from the house. Finally, I hit upon what I considered a far better expedient than either of these. I determined to wall it up in the cellar, as the monks of the Middle Ages are recorded to have walled up their victims. For a purpose such as this, the cellar was admirably adapted. Its walls were loosely constructed and had lately been plastered throughout with a rough plaster, which the dampness of the atmosphere had prevented from hardening. Moreover, in one of the walls was a projection caused by a false chimney or a fireplace that had been filled or walled up and made to resemble the rest of the cellar. I made no doubt that I could readily displace the bricks at this point, insert the corpse, and wall the whole up as before, so that no eye could detect anything suspicious. And in this calculation I was not deceived. By means of a crowbar I easily dislodged the bricks, and having carefully deposited the body against the inner wall, I propped it in that position, while, with little trouble, I relaid the whole structure as it originally stood. Having procured mortar, sand, and hair, and with every possible precaution, I prepared a plaster which could not be distinguished from the old, and with this I very carefully went over the new brickwork. When I had finished, I felt satisfied that all was right. The wall did not present the slightest appearance of having been disturbed. The rubbish on the floor was picked up with the minutest care. I looked around triumphantly and said to myself, "Here, at least, then, my labor has not been in vain." My next step was to look for the beast which had been the cause of so much wretchedness, for I had, at length, firmly resolved to put it to death. Had I been able to meet with it at the moment, there could have been no doubt of its fate, but it appeared that the crafty animal had been alarmed at the violence of my previous anger, and forbore to present itself in my present mood. It is impossible to describe or to imagine the blissful sense of relief which the absence of the detested creature occasioned in my bosom. It did not make its appearance during the night, and thus for one night at least, since its introduction into the house, I soundly and tranquilly slept. I slept, even with the burden of murder upon my soul. The second and the third day passed, and still my tormentor came not. Once again I breathed as a free man. The monster in terror had fled the premises forever. I should behold it no more. My happiness was supreme. The guilt of my dark deed disturbed me but little. Some few inquiries had been made, but these had been readily answered. Even a search had been instituted, but of course nothing was to be discovered. I looked upon my future felicity as secured. Upon the fourth day of the assassination, a party of the police came, very unexpectedly, into the house, and proceeded again to make rigorous investigation of the premises. Secure, however, in the inscrutability of my place of concealment, I felt no embarrassment whatever. The officers bade me accompany them in their search. They left no nook or corner unexplored. At length, for the third or fourth time, they descended into the cellar. I quivered not in a muscle. My heart beat calmly as that of one who slumbers in innocence. I walked the cellar from end to end. I folded my arms upon my bosom, and roamed easily to and fro. The police were thoroughly satisfied and prepared to depart. The glee at my heart was too strong to be restrained. I burned to say if but one word by way of triumph, and to render doubly sure their assurance of my guiltlessness. "Gentlemen," I said at last as the party ascended the steps, "I delight to have allayed your suspicions. I wish you all health and a little more courtesy. By the by, gentlemen, this is a very well-constructed house." In the rabid desire to say something easily, I scarcely knew what I uttered at all. "I may say an excellently well-constructed house. These walls— Are you going, gentlemen? These walls are solidly put together." And here, through the mere frenzy of bravado, I rapped heavily with a cane which I held in my hand upon that very portion of the brickwork behind which stood the ghastly corpse of the wife of my bosom. But may God shield and deliver me from the fangs of the arch-fiend. No sooner had the reverberation of my blows sunk into silence than I was answered by a voice from within the tomb. By a cry, at first muffled and broken like the sobbing of a child, and then quickly swelling into one long, loud, and continuous scream, utterly anomalous and inhuman, a howl, a wailing shriek, half of horror and half of triumph, such as might have arisen only out of hell, conjointly from the throats of the damned in their agony and of the demons that exult their damnation. Of my own thoughts it is folly to speak. Swooning, I staggered to the opposite wall. For one instant, the party upon the stairs remained motionless, through extremity of horror and of awe. In the next, a dozen stout arms were toiling at the wall. It fell bodily. The corpse, already greatly decayed and clotted with gore, stood erect before the eyes of the spectators. Upon its head, with red extended mouth and solitary eye of fire, sat the hideous beast whose craft had seduced me into murder, and whose informing voice had consigned me to the hangman. I had walled the monster up within the tomb. And that was the Black Cat. That was kind of a long one. How we doing? How we doing? What'd you think? Toxoplasmosis is pretty nuts. What? Toxoplasmosis? I've never heard that word before. Tea break. My voice is actually starting to get kind of tired now. I was going pretty strong there until that one, which is I think better than I usually do. So that's nice. We have one more poem and one more post story, and then one other story. They might run a little bit longer than I expected, but should be okay. Yeah, I'll take a second before we get back in. Don't know as follow stories, but enjoying listening along. I am glad. I've actually never really watched a stream like this. Or anything like this, really. So I hope I'm doing an okay job. I don't know what, I don't know if there's anything like else people usually do. May just be you, but I'm one of the more broken VTubers you've seen? Oh, what does that mean? What does that mean? What do you mean by broken? Like I don't, what do you mean? A really relaxing stream? Oh, that's good. Yeah, I figure even if you're not totally into the stories necessarily, everybody says how much they like my voice, so you get some of that on sort of in more isolation. My health is poor? Oh. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess. Going to be the best VTuber storyteller? No, I think there's, I think that's already taken. Tagged along on a couple like this. Brain just turns off and enjoy the sound and only catch stray bits. Okay. Like post style. Yeah, the way he writes is really nice. It's kind of, I always have this thing when I read something, when I like start something new from an author where like it takes me a little while to sort of settle into the way they write and to kind of get the hang of it. They got serious competition now. Alright. Ever entertaining watch. Story time to be most comforting. Well, I'm glad. Even if I'm broken, at least I can read you guys some nice stories. Speaking of broken, today is good for giving my hands a rest in between Sekiro and Monster Hunter. Oh, day's been great. Lovely. Yeah, Fridays are always unlovely. Nice stories. Yeah, nice stories. Very nice, pleasant stories for you all. Oh, Please one day some Soulsborne lore reading. Okay, okay, okay. We can maybe see about that. That could, you know. Okay, we're gonna do some lore reading for Elden Ring that may not necessarily be pleasant to listen to, but I will be sharing some lore from Elden Ring at some point. Broken and don't think I can be fixed. You're right, I can't. Wouldn't have me any other way. Well, I appreciate that. But anyway, thank you, D. I will see about that. I would have to do some actual definite lore writing for that, I think, because I wouldn't feel good about like just reading what someone else has written. I would, when it's like other like content creators or something, I would have to like, I don't know, ask permission to do something like that, and I don't know. I could try to like write some stuff though. That could be fun. I gotta get back into Dark Souls lore. It's been a really long time. SCP reading, yeah, we'll probably do another SCP reading after this, like, next month. The fun is with attempting to fix. Karaoke night then? What do you mean karaoke night then? What? Sell an audiobook of Soulsborne lore you'll buy. That'd be pretty wild. I don't know if I could do that much. We'll see though, we'll see. Alright. Let's continue. We got another poem, so it'll be a little shorter. Alright. The Doomed City, a Prophecy. Lo, death hath reared himself a throne in a strange city all alone, far down within the dim west, and the good and the bad and the worst and the best have gone to their eternal rest. Their shrines and palaces and towers are not like anything of ours. Oh no, ours never loom to heaven with that ungodly gloom. Time-eaten towers that tremble not, around by lifting winds forgot, resignedly beneath the sky, the melancholy waters lie. A heaven that God doth not contemn, with stars is like a diadem. We liken Our Lady's eyes to them, but there that everlasting pall, it would be mockery to call such dreariness a heaven at all. Yet though no holy rays come down on the long night time of that town, light from the lurid deep sea streams up the turrets silently, up thrones, up long-forgotten bowers of sculptured ivy and stone flowers, up domes, up spires, up kingly halls, up fanes, up Babylon-like walls, up many a melancholy shrine whose entablatures intertwine, the mask, the viol, and the vine. I feel like there's a typo there, but I don't know. Their open temples, open graves, are on a level with the waves, but not the riches there that lie in each idol's diamond eye, not the gaily jeweled dead tempt the waters from their bed, for nor ripples curl, alas, along that wilderness of glass, no swellings hint that winds may be upon a far-off happier sea. So blend the turrets and shadows there that all seem pendulous in air, while from the high towers of the town death looks gigantically down. But lo, a stir is in the air, the wave, there is a ripple there, as if the towers had thrown aside, in slightly sinking the dull tide, as if the turret tops had given a vacuum in the filmy heaven. The waves have now a redder glow, the very hours are breathing low, and when amid no earthly moans down that town shall settle hence, hell rising from 1,000 thrones shall do it reverence, and death to some more happy clime shall give his undivided time. Ta-da! Karaoke with neighbors. How do I gotta keep telling you guys no karaoke? Writing a 20,000 word essay so I could read it lore for minutes. You guys have no idea the like amount of lore preparation I am attempting to do for Elden Ring. I haven't gotten very far because I've had a lot to do for this week for the streams, but It's gonna take me a bit. It's gonna take a bit. Alright. We have two left. One I know is quite short. The other one I think is on the shorter side as well. We have The Mask of the Red Death. No karaoke, then some acapellas. No, that's not what I meant. Sounds like when I was working on my model. Oh, for Elden Ring? Yeah, I'm also working on my model again, so I have a lot going on. I have a lot going on right now. It's been rolling. My voice needs another second. Sending casting calls and scouting locations. Yep. We're gonna do full-on Elden Ring lore reenactments. Get ready. How can mirrors be real? What? Current background music is just perfect. It's a fun one. I found some ones I really liked. This one is called the Dark House by the Ocean. And I was so happy when I saw that title, and then I clicked on it and it was like perfect. Alright. Let us jump into The Mask of the Red Death. The Red Death had long devastated the country. No pestilence had ever been so fatal or so hideous. Blood was its avatar and its seal, the redness and the horror of blood. There were sharp pains and sudden dizziness, and then profuse bleedings at the pores with dissolution. The scarlet stains upon the body, and especially upon the face of the victim, were the pest ban, which shut him out from aid and from the sympathy of his fellow men. And the whole seizure, progress and termination of the disease were the incidents of half an hour. But the Prince Prospero was happy and dauntless and sagacious. When his dominions were half depopulated, he summoned to his presence 1,000 hale and light-hearted friends from among the knights and dames of his court, and with these retired to this deep seclusion of one of his castellated abbeys. This was an extensive and magnificent structure, with the creation of the prince's own eccentric yet august gaze. A strong and lofty wall girdled it in. This wall had gates of iron. The courtiers, having entered, brought furnaces and massy hammers and welded the bolts. They resolved to leave means neither of ingress nor egress to the sudden impulses of despair from without or of frenzy from within. The abbey was amply provisioned. With such precautions the courtiers might bid defiance to contagion. The external world could take care of itself. In the meantime it was folly to grieve or to think. The prince had provided all the appliances of pleasure. They were buffoons, they were improvisatory, there were ballet dancers, there were musicians, there were cards, there was beauty, there was wine. All these and security were within. Without was the Red Death. It was towards the close of the 5th or 6th month of this seclusion, and while the pestilence raged most furiously abroad, that the Prince Prospero entertained his 1,000 friends at a masked ball of the most unusual magnificence. It was a voluptuous scene, that masquerade. But first let me tell of the rooms in which it was held. There were 7, an imperial suite. In many palaces, however, such suites form a long and straight vista, while the folding doors slide back nearly to the walls on either hand, so that the view of the whole extent is scarcely impeded. Here the case was very different, as might have been expected from the Duke's love of the bizarre. The apartments were so irregularly disposed that the vision embraced but little more than one at a time. There was a sharp turn at every 20 or 30 yards, at each turn a novel effect. To the right and left, in the middle of each wall, a tall and narrow Gothic window looked out upon a closed corridor which pursued the windings of the suite. These windows were of stained glass whose color varied in accordance with the prevailing hue of the decorations of the chamber into which it opened. That at the eastern extremity was hung, for example, in blue, and vividly blue were its windows. The second chamber was purple in its ornaments and tapestries, and here the panes were purple. The third was green throughout, and so were the casements. The fourth was furnished and litten with orange, the fifth with white, the sixth with violet. The seventh apartment was closely shrouded in black velvet tapestries that hung all over the ceiling and down the walls, falling in heavy folds upon a carpet of the same material and hue. But in this chamber only, the color of the windows failed to correspond with the decorations. The panes here were scarlet, a deep blood color. Now, in no one of the 7 apartments was there any lamp or candelabrum, amid the profusion of golden ornaments that lay scattered to and fro or depended from the roof. There was no light of any kind emanating from lamp or candle within the suite of chambers. But in the corridors that followed the suite there stood, opposite to each window, a heavy tripod, bearing a brazier of fire that projected its rays through the tinted glass, and so glaringly illumined the room. And thus were produced a multitude of gaudy and fantastic appearances, but in the western or black chamber, the effect of the firelight that streamed upon the dark hangings through the blood-tinted panes was ghastly in the extreme, and produced so wild a look upon the countenances of those who entered, that there were few of the company bold enough to set foot within its precincts at all. It was in this apartment also that there stood against the western wall a gigantic clock of ebony. Its pendulum swung to and fro with a dull, heavy, monotonous clang, and when its minute hand made the circuit of the face, and the hour was to be stricken, there came forth from the brazen lungs of the clock a sound which was clear and loud and deep and exceedingly musical, but of so peculiar a note and emphasis that at each lapse of an hour, the musicians in the orchestra were constrained to pause momently in their performance to hearken to the sound, and thus the waltzers perforce ceased their evolutions, and there was a brief disconcert of the whole gay company, and while the chimes of the clock yet rang, it was observed that the giddiest grew pale, and that the more aged and sedate passed their hands over their brows, as if in confused reverie or meditation. But when the echoes had fully ceased, a light laughter at once pervaded the assembly. The musicians looked at each other, and smiled as if at their own nervousness and folly, and made whispering vows, each to the other, that the next chiming of the clock should produce in them no similar emotion. And then, after the lapse of 60 minutes, which embrace 3,600 seconds of the time that flies, there came yet another chiming of the clock, and then were the same disconcert and tremulousness and meditation as before. But in spite of these things, it was a gay and magnificent revel. The tastes of the Duke were peculiar. He had a fine eye for colors and effects. He disregarded the decora of mere fashion. His plans were bold and fiery, and his conceptions glowed with barbaric luster. There are some who would have thought him mad. His followers felt that he was not. It was necessary to hear and see and touch him to be sure that he was not. He had directed in great part the movable embellishments of the 7 chambers upon occasion of this great fete, and it was his own guiding taste which had given character to the costumes of the masqueraders. But be sure they were grotesque. There were much glare and glitter and piquancy and phantasm. Much of what has been since seen in Hernani. There were arabesque figures with unsuited limbs and appointments. There were delirious fancies such as the madman fashions. There was much of the beautiful, much of the wanton, much of the bizarre, something of the terrible, and not a little of that which might have excited disgust. To and fro in the 7 chambers there stalked, in fact, a multitude of dreams, and these the dreams writhed in and about, taking hue from the rooms and causing the wild music of the orchestra to seem as the echo of their steps. And anon there strikes the ebony clock which stands in the hall of the velvet. And then, momently, all is still, and all is still save the voice of the clock. The dreams are stiff frozen as they stand, but the echoes of the chime die away. They have endured but an instant, and a light, half-subdued laughter floats after them as they depart. and now again the music swells, and the dreams live, and writhe to and fro more merrily than ever, taking hue from the many-tinted windows through which stream the rays from the tripods. But to the chamber which lies most westwardly of the seven, there are now none of the maskers who venture, for the night is waning away, and there flows a ruddier light through the blood-colored panes, and the blackness of the sable drapery appalls, and to him whose foot falls upon the sable carpet, there come from the near clock of ebony a muffled peal more solemnly emphatic than any which reaches their ears who indulge in the more remote gaieties of the other apartments. But these other apartments were densely crowded, and in them beat feverishly the heart of life, and the revel went whirringly on until at length the sound was sounded, the 12th hour upon the clock. And then the music ceased, as I have told, and the evolutions of the waltzers were quieted, and there was an uneasy cessation of all things as before. But now there were 12 strokes to be sounded by the bell of the clock, and thus it happened, perhaps, that more of thought crept with more of time into the meditations of the thoughtful among those who revelled. And thus again it happened, perhaps, that before the last echoes of the chime had utterly sunk into silence, there were many individuals in the crowd who had found leisure to become aware of the presence of a masked figure which had arrested the attention of no single individual before. And the rumor of this new presence having spread itself whisperingly around, there arose at length from the whole company a buzz, a murmur, expressive at first of disapprobation and surprise, then finally of terror, of horror, and of disgust. In an assembly of phantasms such as I have painted, it may well be supposed that no ordinary appearance could have excited such sensation. In truth, the masquerade license of the night was nearly unlimited, but the figure in question had out-Heroded Herod, and gone beyond the bounds of even the prince's indefinite decorum. There are chords in the hearts of the most reckless which cannot be touched without emotion, even with the utterly lost, to whom life and death are equally jests. There are matters of which no jest can be properly made. The whole company indeed seemed now to feel that in the costume and bearing of the stranger neither wit nor propriety existed. The figure was tall and gaunt, and shrouded from head to foot in the habiliments of the grave. The mask which concealed the visage was made so nearly to resemble the countenance of a stiffened corpse that the closest scrutiny must have had difficulty in detecting the cheat. And yet all this might have been endured, if not approved, by the mad revellers around. But the mummer had gone so far as to assume the type of the Red Death. His vesture was dabbled in blood, and his broad brow, with all the features of the face, was besprinkled with the scarlet horror. When the eyes of the Prince Prospero fell upon the spectral image, which with a slow and solemn movement, as if more fully to sustain its role, stalked to and fro among the waltzers, he was seen to be convulsed in the first moment with a strange shudder either of terror or distaste, but in the next his brow reddened with rage. "Who dares," he demanded hoarsely of the group that stood around him, "who dares thus to make mockery of our woes? Uncase the varlet, that we may know whom we have to hang tomorrow at sunrise from the battlements. Will no one stir at my bidding? Stop him, and strip him, I say, of those reddened vestures of sacrilege." It was in the eastern or blue chamber in which stood the Prince Prospero as he uttered these words. They rang throughout the 7 rooms loudly and clearly, for the prince was a bold and robust man, and the music had become hushed at the waving of his hand. It was in the blue room where stood the prince, with a group of pale courtiers by his side. At first, as he spoke, there was a slight rushing movement of this group in the direction of the intruder, who at the moment was also near at hand, and now, with deliberate and stately step, made closer approach to the speaker. But from a certain nameless awe with which the mad assumptions of the mummer had inspired the whole party, there were found none who put forth hand to seize him, so that, unimpeded, he passed within a yard of the prince's person, and, while the vast assembly, as if with one impulse, shrank from the centres of the rooms to the walls, he made his way uninterruptedly, but with the same solemn and measured step which had distinguished him from the first, through the blue chamber to the purple, through the purple to the green to the orange, through this again to the white, and even thence to the violet, ere a decided movement had been made to arrest him. It was then, however, that the Prince Prospero, maddening with rage and the shame of his own momentary cowardice, rushed hurriedly through the 6 chambers, while none followed him on account of a deadly terror that had seized upon all. He bore aloft a drawn dagger, and had approached, in rapid impetuosity, to within 3 or 4 feet of the retreating figure, when the latter, having attained the extremity of the velvet apartment, turned suddenly round and confronted his pursuer. There was a sharp cry, and the dagger dropped gleaming upon the sable carpet, upon which instantly afterwards fell prostrate in death the Prince Prospero. Then, summoning the wild courage of despair, a throng of the revellers at once threw themselves into the black apartment, and seizing the mummer, whose tall figure stood erect and motionless within the shadow of the ebony clock, gasped in unutterable horror at finding the grave cerements and corpse-like mass which they handled with so violent a rudeness, untenanted by any tangible form. And now was acknowledged the presence of the Red Death. He had come like a thief in the night, and one by one dropped the revellers in the blood-bedewed halls of their revel, and died each in the despairing posture of his fall. And the life of the ebony clock went out with that of the last of the gay. And the flames of the tripods expired, and the darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all. Ah, the Mask of the Red Death. That one's my favorite. Yeah, don't kill all your friends. Easy. Always good, cool idea for a stream. Thank you. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, that one's my favorite. So I saved it for last. We still have one more thing to read though. That's the last post story. I need a second again. My voice is really wearing out. I thought about doing that one first, actually. But then I put it at the end. I don't know. Maybe I'll put on that Dark House one for our next thing we're gonna read. That might be a good fit. Always have to save the best for last. Well, we haven't truly saved the best for last. That would be the case if this was actually the end of the stream, but it's not quite. Why did I decide to switch up? I don't know. I thought I should start with the Raven. And then I don't know. I think it was just that my first thought was to do this one first, but then I don't know. I thought about it more and I wanted to save it for the end. We do have a surprise closing here. This is the part to be nervous about for me. A mysterious document appeared on my desktop. I do not know from where it came, but I thought I would read it for you all. It appears to be an old tale, an old record of something, and I don't know who wrote it, but I believe that whoever wrote it is not much of a writer and would want you all to go easy on them. Whoever they are. Whoever they are. Did I have to use lemon juice and hold it up to candlelight? Yeah, I had to do the digital equivalent of that, which was running it through Google Translate in a specific sequence through at least 10 languages, and then when I did it correctly, it came out like this when I put it back to English. So yes, there was an additional note on the document with this additional info that the person who wrote this was not much of a writer. All right, are we ready? Are we ready? This was also, the note says that this was written in a little bit of a rush and could maybe use a little more work, but I will let you guys be the judge of that. Okay. Transcript of a journal kept by T. Redacted, 14th, 18, redacted. I arrived today at the town of H. I was already informed of its uninviting atmosphere, but I did not expect the place to appear all but dead. The town appears to be carved directly out of the forest that surrounds it, the trees which once stood tall here now living on as planks eternally soaked through with mist and rain and salt. For all the life in the town, it looks as if the forest could reclaim it at any time. If not for the wind off the sea ceaselessly beating back its advance. The streets are apparently not maintained in any way, and it would be futile to attempt it. There has been a strong and steady rain since I arrived this morning, carving away what would be roads for people and leaving them as channels for the swift-running water. The windows are all shuttered, the shops are all closed. It is easy to feel as though I am seeing things in this town. The shadows seem to move, and I often convince myself that figures hide in them, only to find no one there. I feared it would be impossible to find lodging in a place like this. However, set just at the edge of the land, shining white and clear as the only thing in the town that seemed inhabited, was a lighthouse. I made my way to the keeper's shack, already soaked through. I was greeted by a kind figure, invited in, given a coffee and a place by the fire. Its warmth was matched by that of my host. Redacted told me that the townsfolk are just shy, and it is not such a bad place once you get to know everyone. The shack was simple, but felt like the only clean and dry place one could find in H, full of papers and books and light. Redacted told me about what it's like to keep the lighthouse here, about enjoying writing in spare time. I hesitated to bring up my reason for visiting the town, but redacted. I explained the reports I had heard from fishing vessels passing by here about their avoidance of this area of the very lighthouse Redacted runs, because of the something they believe resides in the waters. Redacted considered this for a moment before telling me there's never been anything truly unusual in the waters here. We made our way up to the lighthouse to look out. From up there, somehow the distinction between the town and the sea becomes even less distinct. They feel like parts of an oil painting smudged before they could dry, the colors running together, the hard edges of things lost. Thinking about it gives me a chill even now. Redacted pointed out an area where the water is rougher than elsewhere, and said that must be what the fishermen are worried about. I was told that it is just the result of the geological structure under that spot and the way it interacts with the currents. I believe this is likely to be the case, but my job will not be done here until I have investigated for myself. I write now from the small and entirely unused hotel taking up space in this town. The proprietor was indeed not as strange as I admittedly expected, but not exactly one to look to for conversation. In the morning, I will take a small boat out to attempt an investigation. Redacted, 15th, 18, redacted. The rain was lighter today. Near dawn, I walked along the beach, and thanks to the low tide, I saw some strange little creatures strewn about. At first, I suspected they were crabs and moved closer to get a better look. As I approached, some of them shuffled away back into the water, and I started to think perhaps they were closer to fish. I found a dead one, hoping to wrap it up in a handkerchief and take it back with me. When I picked it up, it was warm. And it still is now, even as the smell of it here in the room has become regrettable. I will commit to a further inspection this evening and be rid of it. As foreign as it may seem, it is merely a small creature, and I don't expect that it could be responsible for striking great fear into anyone's heart. After the beach, I went out in a small boat with a lead line. Just like the rain, the turbulent area seemed to be calmer than the previous day. As I neared it, I felt as though the water looked far too dark, but at first I was sure it was a trick of the light. At the edge, I began lowering the rope. It went on to a far greater depth than I had imagined it would, but the longer I sat there lowering the rope, the more I became convinced that somewhere in that depth I saw a light. It was the same feeling as looking into the night sky at a star so faint you cannot be entirely sure it is there. It was hard to look away. My consideration of it was eventually halted by heavier rain and choppier waters, so I decided I had best pull the line in and return back. This light, if it was even truly there, could be the source of the trouble, and yet I am at a loss as to how to investigate it further. I stopped by to speak to the lighthouse keeper, to ask if anyone in the town has ever seen a light in that place before. After a moment, Redacted told me that if anyone had, they kept it to themselves. I might have to see about speaking with some of them myself about this. I will record my findings from the little creature that... End of record. What'd you think? Is this Lovecraft? No. But close enough, right? Yeah, very Innsmouth, right? Little bit of Innsmouth, little bit of SCP maybe. Yeah. Strong Lovecraft vibes, dope though. I'm glad you thought so. Definitely the Innsmouth. Job well done. Oh, I'll have to. I mean, I don't know where this document came from. But if I figure out who wrote it, I'll have to pass on the good word. I'm gonna try to do a simple video version of this. Whoever made this will leave me more in the future. Yeah, perhaps they will. Perhaps we'll get to maybe find out more about this if whoever wrote this leaves us some more to read. But I will do a standalone video for a recording of this. It won't be super fancy, but it'll get its own thing. I don't know when I'll have that done, but I will do that. So yeah, that's what I have for today. That's what I brought for you all. We read many a post story. We read not very many a not post story. Yeah, I'll probably make a couple little changes here and there. Just to polish it up a bit. And then get it ready to read and do some like sound effects and stuff, and pick some good music. Nap was good. Well, I'm glad you had a lovely nap with some good background music. And we're even done in like exactly the amount of time I predicted we will take. I'd watched VOD, missed most of it at the start. Very well done. Thank you. Yeah, this was our reading stream for the month. We will probably go back to SCPs next month. And then I also had another idea for a reading stream that we will do at some point. Don't polish too much, the dents and blemishes make it unique. Okay. I also need to just do a better job reading it as well. Usually once a month. Yeah, we've done 2 SCP or 2 SCP streams, I think. Maybe 3? 2. 3? 2? I don't even know. How many SCP streams have we done? 2. There have been 2 SCP streams. This is our 3rd reading stream. I'll do one next month as well. Would you guys like to see this more often? Or less often, I don't know. What do you guys think? We could perhaps work it in every 3 weeks or something, I don't know. I don't want to do them too much. I don't know if my voice would take it. But they are very short. Yeah? Okay, let me make a note. I feel like I would run out of things to read. A scheduled nap, maybe. Once or twice a month? Okay. Let me make a note. It's hard to... It's gotten kind of hard for me trying to make the schedules, and I'm to various genres. Yeah, it's just gotta be something that's legally I can read. So it's a matter of finding stuff that is fitting that I think you guys might like. I know you guys weren't necessarily super into the content of the stories this time, but I guess if you enjoy just listening anyway, then it'll work out. Is Hamlet fair game? No, Hamlet is not fair game. Always more SCPs. Yeah, there's always more SCPs. I think it would be hard to run out of them. But yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of SCPs. How is the schedule hard to make? Well, I gotta make sure we keep going with the games we're already playing and the games that I want to play, and now I have the stream I want to be doing every Sunday, and then I have to make sure that we get the member streams in there when they should happen, and we gotta make sure we get this one in there when it needs to happen, and I gotta make sure I remember to have another manga stream when that time is up. I actually have some ideas to make that one better, actually. All the lectures you had to read in school but didn't understand. What, I just come in here and start lecturing you guys? Hello! You're actually here, just at the end. We were just wrapping up. Reading streams are pretty short. My voice can't go for very long. We shall grow the cult too. Yes, I was working on the schedule for next week. Cult of the Lamb will be on it. Thank you for that. Can't wait for the romance reading streams. Okay, I'm not doing that. I didn't realize that was what you meant by various genres. I'm not doing that. Oh, but yeah, thank you everybody. Flex my vocal cord muscles. Yeah, I guess that's, you know, I get my once a month practice talking a lot. But yeah, thanks everybody. I will see members in a few minutes. I will take a short break, and then we will jump into the members stream. We're gonna be starting to watch Mob Psycho 100. We're gonna watch the first half of season 1. So if you are a disciple or a higher tier, I will hope to see you there. I've never done a watch along. I've never even watched a watch along, so hopefully it'll go well. I think I have everything set up nicely for it. So I hope to see you guys there. And otherwise, no stable boy and rich hair. But yeah, I hope that you guys have a good bread and a good rest of your day or night or whatever it is where you are. And I hope to see you next time. We're doing Monster Hunter tomorrow. We're starting at 10 and we're playing Monster Hunter tomorrow. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you will look forward to it. And I'll see you then.